They put her in handcuffs for knowing her rights. A few days later, their system started to fall apart. "Ma'am, I don't have all day for people who can't afford lawyers." The gavel hits wood. Judge Vernon Whitmore still hasn't looked up from his papers. 40 seconds of silence in courtroom 4B, and the woman standing at the defendant's podium hasn't moved. Her name is Victoria Holloway. She's wearing a plain navy blazer, no jewelry except small earrings, and she's holding a leather folder against her chest like a shield. Whitmore finally glances up. His eyes move over her once. The natural hair, the department store clothes, the absence of a legal team, and something like amusement crosses his face. "Did you hear me?" Victoria's voice comes out steady. "I heard you, Your Honor." "Then let's make this quick. How do you plead?" "Not guilty." The courtroom goes quiet. In the gallery, a few people shift in their seats. The court reporter's fingers pause over his stenotype keys. Whitmore sets down his pen. "Excuse me?" "Not guilty, Your Honor. I'd like to present evidence regarding the signage at the location where the citation was issued." The judge's chair creaks as he leans back. 28 years on this bench, and he's learned to spot trouble before it starts. Self-represented defendants who think they've watched enough legal dramas to play lawyer. Women who don't understand how things work in his courtroom. "Ma'am," he says the word like it tastes sour. "This is traffic court, not the Supreme Court. You got a ticket, you pay the fine, or you plead guilty, and we move on. Simple." Victoria doesn't blink. "Respectfully, Your Honor, under State Code Section 46.2/878, I have the right to contest this citation and present exculpatory evidence." Dead silence. Whitmore's pen stops moving. What he doesn't know, what no one in this courtroom knows, is that Victoria Holloway was appointed Attorney General of this Commonwealth exactly 22 days ago. Her photograph hasn't been released to the press yet. Her first official act will be announcing a judicial reform initiative based on 14 discrimination complaints filed against this courthouse, and she's been watching Judge Vernon Whitmore for the past 3 weeks. If you're satisfied, hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to see what happens next. The morning had started at 6:15 a.m. Victoria's apartment was neat, spare, organized with a precision that bordered on compulsive. She'd laid out her clothes the night before, the plain navy blazer, the gray slacks, the flat shoes that wouldn't click on courthouse tile. In her closet, 3 other blazers hung untouched. Each one bore a small state seal embroidered on the lapel. She passed over all of them. The leather folder went into an ordinary canvas tote bag. Inside the folder, the traffic citation, photographs, printouts, and a single document she hadn't shown anyone. The document had a gold seal at the top and a signature at the bottom, Governor Patricia Stanton's signature, dated September 28th. Victoria checked the contents 3 times, counted the exits in her apartment, front door, balcony, fire escape, old habits from another life, before the corner office at the Attorney General's building, before the encrypted phone that now sat in her bag's inner pocket. She left the encrypted phone where it was. Today she would carry only her personal cell. By 7:30 a.m. she was driving down Riverside Boulevard. The speed trap location came into view, Miller Creek Bridge, the stretch of road where Deputy R. Sloan had pulled her over 3 weeks ago. She slowed as she passed, noting the speed limit sign partially obscured by overgrown tree branches. The posted limit read 35 miles per hour. Her citation said she'd been doing 47 in a 25 zone. Victoria pulled to the shoulder, took out her personal phone, photographed the sign from 3 angles, making sure the date and time metadata would be embedded in each image. 22 days ago, she'd been driving this same road when the blue lights appeared in her rearview mirror. She'd been doing 38, 3 miles over the posted 35. Deputy Sloan had approached her window with his hand already resting on his weapon. "License and registration." She'd complied, watched him study her driver's license for a long moment, then look at her face, then back at the license. "Where are you headed in such a hurry?" "I wasn't in a hurry, Deputy. I was doing 38 in a 35 zone. The limit here is 25. The sign says 35. He'd written the ticket anyway. 47 in a 25, a number that would mean higher fines, points on her license, the possibility of a reckless driving charge if she'd been going just 3 miles faster. Victoria had taken the ticket without argument, said "Thank you, deputy," in a voice that revealed nothing. Drove away with the citation on her passenger seat and a plan already forming in her mind. Because Victoria Holloway had received 14 complaints about Jefferson County Traffic Court in her first week as Attorney General. 14 complaints over 3 years, all dismissed by internal review. All involving defendants of color, all describing the same patterns: extended wait times, denied motions, increased fines, a judge who treated his courtroom like a personal kingdom. The complaints had come from a court reporter named Marcus Delane. 3 times he'd filed, 3 times he'd been ignored. Today, Victoria intended to see for herself. The Jefferson County Courthouse was a 3-story building with white columns and a Confederate memorial on the front lawn that no one had gotten around to removing. Victoria parked in the public lot at 7:50 a.m. and walked through the front entrance with her canvas tote bag over her shoulder. Security line, metal detector. A bailiff with a thick neck and a name tag that read Combs. Bag, open it. Victoria set her tote on the table and unzipped it. Bailiff Combs, Gage Combs, according to the name tag, reached inside without asking permission. His hands moved slowly through her belongings. Legal folder, wallet, phone, a granola bar she'd forgotten she'd packed. His fingers paused on the leather folder. What's this? Documents for my case. You a lawyer? I'm representing myself today. Something shifted in his expression. A small smile that didn't reach his eyes. Good luck with that. He handed her bag back, but not before his hand brushed against hers, deliberate, lingering. Victoria pulled away without changing her expression. Courtroom 4B, he said. Down the hall, second left. Try not to waste the judge's time. She walked away without responding. Behind her, she heard Combs say something to the other security officer, low, laughing. She didn't turn around. The clerk's window was a rectangle of bulletproof glass with a speaker grate and a slot for paperwork. Behind it sat a woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a chain around her neck. The nameplate read, Lila Maddox. Victoria approached the window, waited. Maddox didn't look up from her computer screen. 60 seconds passed. 90. The clock on the wall showed 8:05 a.m. Excuse me. No response. Ma'am, I need to check in for the 8:30 docket. Maddox finally looked up. Her eyes moved over Victoria the same way Bailiff Combs's had, assessing, categorizing, dismissing. Name: Holloway, Victoria, case number 224 TC 08821. The typing was slow, deliberate, each keystroke a performance of inconvenience. You're not on the morning docket. My notice says 8:30 a.m. I have it right here. Victoria pulled the court notice from her folder and held it up to the glass. Maddox barely glanced at it. System says afternoon. Must have been a mistake in processing. Come back at 2. The notice is dated October 3rd. It clearly states, Ma'am. The word came out sharp. I don't make the schedule. The system says afternoon. You can wait in the gallery if you want, but you're not on the morning docket. Next. Victoria didn't move. I'd like to speak with a supervisor about the scheduling discrepancy. Maddox's expression hardened. I am the supervisor. Now step aside. There are other people waiting. Victoria looked behind her. The line was empty. She stepped aside anyway. Some battles weren't worth fighting at the clerk's window. The real battle was in courtroom 4B. The waiting area was a row of plastic chairs bolted to the floor. Victoria took a seat near the middle, where she could see both the courtroom entrance and the clerk's window. She set her bag in her lap and began to watch. 8:12 a.m. An older black man shuffled in, checked the docket posted on the wall, and sat down 3 chairs away. His suit was 20 years out of style but carefully pressed. He held a folder of papers like Victoria held hers, against his chest, protective. 8:19 a.m. A white woman in yoga pants checked in at the clerk's window. Maddox smiled at her. The interaction took less than a minute. 8:23 a.m. The white woman was called into the courtroom. The older black man had been there longer. His case number was lower. Victoria noted the time, noted the names, kept her face neutral. 8:27 a.m. A young Hispanic man arrived, checked in, sat down. The older black man was still waiting. 8:31 a.m. The young Hispanic man was called. The older black man looked at his watch, looked at the courtroom door, said nothing. Victoria understood. After a lifetime of moments like this, you learned that speaking up only made things worse. You learned to wait, to accept, to survive. She was done accepting. 8:45 a.m. The courtroom doors opened and Victoria walked in. The gallery was half full, mostly defendants waiting their turn, a few family members, one woman in a business suit who was probably a public defender juggling too many cases. At the front of the room, Judge Vernon Whitmore presided from an elevated bench, his black robe hanging loose around narrow shoulders. Victoria took a seat in the back row, watched. The first case was called. White defendant, male, mid-40s, represented by counsel. The attorney, a man in an expensive charcoal suit, approached the bench with the casual familiarity of someone who played golf with the judge on weekends. Your Honor, my client acknowledges he was traveling above the posted limit. We'd like to request a reduction in the fine given his clean driving record. Whitmore nodded. I've reviewed the file. $60 fine, reduced from $150. Court costs waived. Next case. 4 minutes. Victoria checked her watch. Second case. Hispanic defendant. Female. Self-represented. She stood at the podium clutching a piece of paper, her hands visibly shaking. Your Honor, I wasn't going that fast. The speed limit changed right where he pulled me over. Ma'am. Whitmore's voice cut across hers like a blade. Are you telling me the deputy lied? No, because if you're accusing a law enforcement officer of perjury, that's a serious allegation. I'm not accusing anyone, I just wanted to explain. Full fine, $200, plus court costs. Pay at the clerk's window. Next. 8 minutes. The woman walked out of the courtroom with her head down. Third case. Black defendant, elderly. The same man Victoria had seen in the waiting area, the one who'd been passed over twice. Terrence Williams, the clerk called. Case number 2024, TC 08734. The old man rose slowly, made his way to the podium. His hands trembled slightly as he opened his folder. Your Honor, I'd like to request the radar calibration certificate for the device used to measure my speed. Whitmore's eyebrows rose. The what? The calibration certificate, Your Honor. I believe I have a right to verify that the equipment was functioning properly. Whitmore leaned forward. His voice dropped to something almost conversational, almost friendly, but Victoria recognized the edge beneath it. Mr. Williams, how long did it take you to look that up online? Your Honor? The calibration certificate request. Did you find that on some website, YouTube video? Someone told you that's how you beat a speeding ticket? I just want to make sure. What you want, Whitmore interrupted, is to waste this court's time. Under State Code Section 46.2882, I have discretion to increase penalties for defendants who consume court resources with frivolous requests. Victoria's jaw tightened. State Code Section 46.2882 covered reckless driving penalties. It said nothing about fine increases for evidentiary requests. Whitmore was making it up. Original fine was $100. I'm increasing it to $200 for the delay you've caused today. Pay at the clerk's window. And Mr. Williams? The judge's smile was thin. Next time, just pay the ticket. The old man walked away without a word. His shoulders were curved inward, his dignity stripped away in 90 seconds. Victoria wrote nothing down. She didn't need to. Every detail was filing itself away in her memory, slotting into place alongside the 14 complaints Marcus Delane had filed over 3 years. Pattern, practice, system. 9:45 a.m. The clerk called Victoria's name. Holloway v. Case 2024 TC A821. Victoria rose, walked to the podium, set her leather folder on the surface, and folded her hands in front of her. Whitmore didn't look up. He was reviewing a document, or pretending to. "How do you plead?" "Not guilty, Your Honor." Now he looked up. "Not guilty." He repeated the words as if tasting them. "On what grounds?" "The citation alleges I was traveling 47 miles per hour in a 25 zone. However, the posted speed limit at that location is 35 miles per hour. The signage is clear. I have photographic evidence." Whitmore's pen stopped moving. Behind her, Victoria heard the gallery go quiet. The court reporter, Marcus Delane, she recognized him from his personnel file photograph, leaned forward over his stenotype machine. "Ma'am?" Whitmore's voice was cold. "Did you just say you have evidence?" "Yes, Your Honor. Photographs of the speed limit sign at the location where I was stopped. The posted limit is clearly 35, not 25. "And where did you get your law degree?" "I don't have a law degree, Your Honor. I'm exercising my right to self-representation under State Code Section 46.2878. Whitmore blinked. Victoria kept her voice level. "The statute provides that any person charged with a traffic violation may contest the citation and present evidence in their defense. I'm not claiming to be an attorney. I'm claiming my rights under state law." For a moment, no one spoke. Victoria could feel the weight of every eye in the courtroom pressing against her back. Then Whitmore laughed. It wasn't a genuine laugh. It was a sound designed to humiliate, to signal to everyone watching that this woman had overstepped, that she didn't understand her place. "Well?" He wiped an imaginary tear from his eye. "We've got a legal scholar here today. Did everyone hear that? She's claiming her rights under state law." Scattered laughter from the gallery. Victoria didn't turn around. "Your Honor." Her voice cut through the noise. "May I present my evidence?" "You may not." "On what grounds?" "On the grounds that I said so." Whitmore leaned forward. "This is my courtroom, Ms. Holloway. I've been on this bench for 28 years. I decide what evidence is relevant and what's a waste of time. And right now, you're wasting time." Victoria reached into her folder. "Your Honor, the photograph clearly shows—" "Bailiff." The word snapped through the air like a whip. Victoria heard heavy footsteps approaching from her left. Gage Combs appeared beside her, standing too close, his hand resting on his belt. "Ma'am?" His voice was low, meant only for her. "You need to calm down." "I am calm." "You're agitating the judge." "I'm presenting a defense." His hand moved from his belt to her arm, fingers closing around her bicep, not hard enough to bruise, but hard enough to communicate control. "Step back from the podium." Victoria didn't move. "Bailiff, I'm asking you not to touch me. And I'm telling you to step back." "Bailiff Combs." She kept her voice steady, but something in her tone made him hesitate. "I'm going to ask you one more time. Remove your hand from my arm." "Or what?" "Or I'll add it to my documentation." Hit subscribe and comment Part 2 so you don't miss what happens when she finally reveals who she really is. The moment stretched. Combs's fingers tightened on her arm, then released. He stepped back, but he didn't leave her side. At the bench, Whitmore was watching with an expression that mixed annoyance with something darker. Interest, maybe. The interest of a man who'd found a new toy to break. "Ms. Holloway." His voice was almost gentle now. "Let me explain how this works. You received a traffic citation. The citation says you were doing 47 in a 25 zone. The citing officer is a deputy sheriff with 15 years of experience. His word carries weight in this courtroom. Yours." He paused. "Well, yours doesn't." "Your Honor, I have physical evidence." "What you have," Whitmore interrupted, "is a photograph you probably took this morning. No chain of custody, no expert verification. Nothing that proves the sign you photographed is even at the same location. The metadata timestamp? The what? The digital timestamp embedded in the photograph. It shows the exact date and time the image was captured. October 15, 2024, 7:42 a.m., one day after the citation was issued. Whitmore's expression flickered, just for a moment. Your Honor, the prosecutor, Dorian Vance, according to the nameplate at his table, rose to his feet. The state objects. Lack of foundation. The defendant hasn't established her qualifications to interpret digital metadata. Sustained. Victoria kept her voice level. I'm not claiming expertise, Your Honor. I'm stating that the photograph has a timestamp that can be independently verified by any digital forensics. I said sustained, Ms. Holloway. Move on or sit down. She didn't sit down. Your Honor, I'd like to request a continuance to subpoena the official speed limit survey for Riverside Boulevard from the Department of Transportation. Denied. The survey would establish the posted limit at the location. Denied. Your Honor, denying a continuance for the purpose of obtaining exculpatory evidence may constitute a due process violation under the 14th Amendment. Silence. Complete, absolute silence. Victoria watched Whitmore's face cycle through several expressions: surprise, disbelief, and finally, a cold fury that he didn't bother to hide. Did you just cite the Constitution at me? I'm preserving the record, Your Honor. The record? He laughed again, but there was no humor in it. You think anyone's going to read the transcript of a traffic case? You think anyone cares what happens in this courtroom? Victoria glanced at Marcus Delane. The court reporter's fingers hadn't stopped moving. Someone might, Your Honor. Whitmore's face went red. Bailiff. Combs stepped forward again. This time his hand went to Victoria's shoulder, gripping hard, fingers digging into muscle. Ma'am, you need to come with me. Am I under arrest? You're being removed for contempt. Has the judge issued a contempt finding? I'm issuing one now. Whitmore banged his gavel. Ms. Holloway, you are in contempt of this court. Fine of $200, in addition to the original citation. Pay at the clerk's window, and if I see you in my courtroom again— Your Honor. Victoria's voice cut through his tirade. I'd like my objection noted for the record. Note whatever you want. Bailiff, remove her. Combs' grip tightened. He pulled her back from the podium, hard enough that she stumbled, had to catch herself on the edge of the gallery railing. Hands behind your back. I haven't committed a crime. Contempt is a crime. He was reaching for his handcuffs now. Turn around. Victoria turned, slowly. Her eyes swept across the gallery, the faces watching, some sympathetic, most carefully blank. The court reporter's fingers still moving. The prosecutor pretending to review his files. Combs grabbed her wrist, pulled it behind her back. The cold metal of the handcuff touched her skin. Wait. The voice came from the front of the courtroom. Everyone turned. It was the prosecutor, Dorian Vance. He was standing now, his face uncertain. Your Honor, may I approach? Whitmore frowned. What is it? Vance walked to the bench, leaned in close, whispered something Victoria couldn't hear. Whatever he said made Whitmore's expression change. The rage drained away, replaced by something more calculating. Bailiff, release her. Combs hesitated. Release her, but she doesn't leave this building. The handcuff fell away from Victoria's wrist. She rubbed the spot where the metal had pressed against her skin, feeling the faint ache that would become a bruise by morning. Miss Holloway. Whitmore's voice was different now, controlled. Given the prosecutor's concerns about courtroom procedure, I'm going to suspend my contempt finding, temporarily. But your citation stands. Guilty verdict. $450 plus court costs. Your Honor. However, he held up a hand. If you want to appeal, you're welcome to file the paperwork at the clerk's window. Although I should warn you, appeals in traffic court are rarely successful, especially when the appellant doesn't have an attorney. He smiled. It was the smile of a man who'd won and wanted her to know it. Maybe bring a real lawyer next time, sweetheart. Someone who understands how things work around here. Victoria gathered her folder. Her hands were steady. Her face revealed nothing. She turned to leave. Whitmore's voice followed her. "And, Miss Holloway, one more thing." She stopped. "That photograph of yours, the one with the timestamp, you might want to check it again. Speed limits change, signs get moved. What was true last week might not be true today." He paused. "Things change around here, sometimes overnight." Victoria walked out of the courtroom without responding, but she didn't leave the building. The hallway outside courtroom 4B was empty except for a water fountain and a bulletin board covered with notices about jury duty and parking regulations. Victoria leaned against the wall, letting the cool surface press against her shoulder blades, and waited for her heartbeat to slow. The encounter had gone exactly as she'd expected. Worse, actually, she hadn't anticipated the handcuffs, the physical escalation, the prosecutor's last-minute intervention. That part was interesting. What had Vance whispered to make Whitmore back down? She pulled out her phone, opened the voice memo app, spoke quietly. "October 16th, 2024, 9:52 a.m. Observed court proceedings in courtroom 4B, Jefferson County Traffic Court. Presiding judge, Vernon Whitmore. 3 cases witnessed prior to my own. Pattern consistent with complaints filed by Marcus Delane, JC 2023-0441, JC 2023-0892, JC 2024-0156. Discriminatory treatment in wait times, fine amounts, and judicial demeanor. My own case. Denied opportunity to present evidence, denied continuance for DOT records, physically restrained by bailiff Gage Combs, contempt finding issued, then suspended following intervention by prosecutor Dorian Vance. Vance's motivation unclear. Will continue observation." She ended the recording, slipped the phone back into her bag. The courtroom doors opened. An older white man emerged, the attorney in the expensive charcoal suit who'd gotten his client's fine reduced by 2/3 in 4 minutes. Wells Ogilvy. Victoria recognized him from the County Bar Association website. He spotted her and stopped. Something moved across his face. Curiosity, calculation, decision. "Holloway, right?" Victoria straightened. "That's right. Saw your little performance in there." He smiled. The smile didn't reach his eyes. "Word of advice. Drop it. Pay the fine. Whitmore doesn't like being challenged, especially by—" He gestured vaguely at her, a motion that encompassed everything she was. "Self-represented defendants. Thank you for your concern." "I'm serious." He stepped closer, lowered his voice. "He'll find you in contempt again. And next time, he won't let the prosecutor talk him out of it. You'll spend a night in county lockup over a speeding ticket. Is that worth it?" Victoria studied him. The expensive suit, the manicured nails, the easy confidence of a man who'd never been handcuffed in a courtroom. "Some judges appreciate humility," Ogilvy continued. "This one, he appreciates knowing his place." He paused. "And yours." He walked away before she could respond. Victoria watched him stop at the end of the hallway. Knock twice on a door marked Chambers, Judge V. Whitmore. Open it without waiting for an answer. Enter. The door closed behind him. Victoria noted the time. 10:04 a.m. Oh. She didn't leave the courthouse. Instead, she found a seat in the waiting area near courtroom 4B and settled in to watch. Her canvas tote bag sat in her lap. Her leather folder remained closed. The morning docket continued. Victoria tracked each case: defendant's name, race, representation status, wait time, outcome. The pattern was consistent. White defendants with attorneys received reduced fines and brief hearings. Black and Hispanic defendants, especially those representing themselves, received full penalties and public humiliation. By 11 a.m., she'd observed 9 additional cases. 7 followed the pattern. 2 were exceptions: a white defendant representing herself who received the same dismissive treatment as the black defendants, and a black defendant with private counsel who got his fine reduced. The common denominator wasn't just race, it was power. Whitmore treated anyone without institutional backing like an obstacle to be removed, but race made it worse. Much worse. At 11:15 a.m., the morning session ended for recess. Victoria watched the courtroom empty, defendants filing out, attorneys checking phones, Whitmore disappearing through a side door toward his chambers. The court reporter emerged last. Marcus Delane, mid-30s, professional demeanor, the careful movements of someone who'd learned to make himself invisible. He walked past Victoria toward the water fountain. Stopped. Glanced over his shoulder. Their eyes met. He didn't speak. Just reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Let it drop to the floor near her chair. Kept walking. Victoria waited until he'd rounded the corner. Then she picked up the paper and walked to the women's restroom at the end of the hall. Inside a stall, she unfolded the note. Handwritten, neat, precise letters. This happens every Tuesday. I've been documenting for 8 months. No one listens. MD. On the back, a list of case numbers, 14 of them. Victoria read each number twice, cross-referenced them mentally with the complaints she'd reviewed in her first week as Attorney General. 11 matches. 3 additional cases she hadn't seen before. All involving defendants of color. All involving this courtroom, this judge, this systematic machinery of injustice. She folded the note carefully and placed it in her leather folder, next to the document with the governor's signature. The afternoon session began at 1:30 p.m. Victoria returned to the gallery. Same seat, back row, clear sight line to the bench and the clerk's station. Her morning observations had been about pattern recognition. Her afternoon observations would be about documentation. 1:45 p.m. A case was called. Black defendant, self-represented. Victoria watched Lila Maddox shuffle papers at her station, watched her move one file from the top of a stack to the bottom. The defendant who'd just been passed over was also black. 1:52 p.m. The same defendant, Williams, R., according to the docket, was finally called. Victoria checked her notes. He'd arrived at 7:50 a.m. 7 hours of waiting. 2:15 p.m. A door opened at the side of the courtroom. Wells Ogilvy entered, carrying a thin briefcase. He spoke briefly with Lila Maddox at the clerk's station, leaning close enough to share a laugh about something. Victoria watched Maddox hand him a file. Ogilvy glanced at it, nodded, handed it back. The file didn't match any case number on the afternoon docket. Victoria was sure of it. She'd memorized the docket when she arrived. Ogilvy caught her watching. His expression shifted. Recognition, then something colder. He walked to the prosecutor's table and sat down next to Dorian Vance. Whispered something. Both men looked at Victoria. She didn't look away. 2:30 p.m. Recess. Victoria stayed in her seat while the courtroom emptied. The court reporter walked past her again. This time he didn't drop anything, but he slowed for just a moment, long enough for Victoria to hear him murmur a single word. Careful. She nodded once. He kept walking. 2:45 p.m. The afternoon session resumed. Whitmore emerged from his chambers. His eyes swept the courtroom, found Victoria still sitting in the back row, and narrowed. He didn't say anything, but he didn't have to. The message was clear. Why are you still here? Victoria folded her hands in her lap and waited. 3:10 p.m. A case that should have taken 5 minutes dragged to 20. Whitmore seemed distracted, kept glancing toward the gallery. At one point he called a recess without explanation, 5 minutes, and disappeared through the side door. When he returned, Wells Ogilvy was with him. They walked to the bench together. Ogilvy leaned in close, whispered something. Whitmore's face went pale. Victoria felt something shift in the air, a tremor of power, invisible but unmistakable. She didn't know what Ogilvy had said, but she knew it was about her. Whitmore looked directly at her. For the first time all day, his expression held something other than contempt. It held fear. 3:20 p.m. Whitmore banged his gavel. Court is in recess until tomorrow morning. All afternoon cases are continued, no exceptions. Murmurs from the gallery. Defendants who'd waited hours were being sent away. The public defender shot to her feet. Your Honor, some of these defendants took time off work. Continued. Whitmore's voice was flat. Speak to the clerk about rescheduling. He rose from the bench, walked toward his chambers, paused at the side door and looked back at Victoria one final time. Something passed between them, a silent acknowledgement that the game had changed, that she'd done something, triggered something, set something in motion. Then he was gone. Victoria didn't leave. She waited until the courtroom emptied, until Lila Maddox packed up her station and headed for the parking lot, until the security guard at the front entrance started checking his watch. 5:15 p.m. She walked to the clerk's window one final time. A different clerk was on duty now, younger, less hostile. Victoria requested copies of the afternoon docket and sign-in sheets, paid the copying fee in cash, took her documents. She was walking toward the exit when she heard footsteps behind her. Miss Holloway. She turned. Gage Combs stood in the hallway. Off duty now, his uniform shirt untucked, but his posture hadn't changed. Still the same predatory alertness. Building's closing. I'm leaving. Good. He stepped closer. And don't come back. Is that a threat, bailiff? It's advice. His voice dropped. You made some powerful people nervous today. That's not a good thing in this county. People who make waves, sometimes they have accidents, car trouble on a dark road, paperwork that gets lost, charges that show up out of nowhere. Victoria didn't flinch. Are you threatening me, Bailiff Combs? I'm explaining how things work. He smiled, the same smile from that morning when he'd made her empty her bag at security. You're not from around here. You don't have connections. You don't have anyone looking out for you. Just another... He paused. Let the silence fill in the word he didn't say. Just another defendant, he finished, who forgot her place. Victoria held his gaze. I know exactly where my place is, bailiff, and it's not where you think. She turned and walked away. His voice followed her to the exit. See you next time, Ms. Holloway, if there is a next time. Save this video. Part 2 drops soon, and you'll want to see the moment everything changes. The drive home took 30 minutes. Victoria kept both hands on the wheel, checked her mirrors every 15 seconds, noted each car that stayed behind her for more than 3 turns, counted 2, both of which eventually turned off. She wasn't being followed. Not yet. Her apartment felt different when she walked in. The same spare furniture, the same neat organization, but something had shifted. She'd crossed a line today that couldn't be uncrossed. She set her canvas tote bag on the kitchen counter, removed the leather folder, spread its contents across the dining room table. Traffic citation, photographs of the speed limit sign, court notice, docket records, sign-in sheets, Marcus Delane's handwritten note, and the document she hadn't shown anyone, the one with the gold seal and the governor's signature. Office of the Governor, Commonwealth of Virginia, executive appointment. To Victoria Holloway, the Office of Attorney General is hereby conferred upon you, effective immediately, following the resignation of Attorney General Marcus Webb. Signed, Patricia Stanton, Governor, September 28, 2024. Victoria read the letter once more. Then she opened her encrypted phone, the one from the inner pocket of her bag, and dialed a number from memory. 1 ring. 2. Attorney General's office. It's Holloway. I need a secure line to Assistant Attorney General Monroe at the DOJ Civil Rights Division. Tell her the Jefferson County assessment is complete. We're moving to Phase 2. A pause on the other end. Yes, ma'am. Connecting you now. The line clicked. soft static. Then a woman's voice. Patricia Monroe, 15 years at the Department of Justice, currently leading the Civil Rights Division's pattern or practice investigations. Victoria, how bad? Worse than the complaints suggested. I witnessed 8 cases today. Systematic discrimination in docket management, evidentiary rulings, and sentencing. Physical intimidation by courthouse staff. Possible coordination between the judge and local defense counsel. Can you document it? I have contemporaneous notes, photographs, and docket records. The court reporter has been documenting for 8 months. He slipped me a list of case numbers that match 11 of the 14 complaints we received. That's enough for preliminary findings. I want more. Victoria's voice was flat. I want the pattern so clear that no one can dismiss it. I want the internal emails, the personnel files, the financial records. I want to know who's protecting Whitmore and why. Monroe was quiet for a moment. You know this gets complicated if you're personally involved. You were a defendant in his court today. Any evidence you gathered is admissible because I gathered it as a private citizen, not as a law enforcement officer. The appointment wasn't public yet. I didn't identify myself. Whitmore didn't know who I was. And now? Now I stay invisible for a little longer, long enough to finish the documentation. Then we move. How long? Victoria looked at the documents spread across her table. The traffic citation with its falsified speed reading. Marcus Delane's note with its desperate plea. The governor's letter that would change everything once it became public. A few more days. I want to see what happens when I go back. You're going back? I filed an appeal this afternoon, hearings scheduled for Friday. Monroe laughed, a short, surprised sound. You're going to make him face you again, knowing what's coming. He humiliated 3 defendants today, denied their constitutional rights, had his bailiff put hands on me. Victoria's voice hardened. He's been doing this for 28 years, Patricia. How many people? How many lives? Someone has to stop him. And that someone is you. That someone is us. I'm just the one who walked through the door. Silence on the line. Then Monroe spoke again, her voice softer. Be careful, Victoria. Men like Whitmore don't go down easy. They have friends, protection, decades of institutional backing. I know. And you're going back anyway. Victoria looked at the governor's letter one more time. The gold seal, the signature, the title beneath her name, Attorney General. I'm going back anyway. Wednesday passed in preparation. Victoria spent the morning at her office, the real one on the 6th floor of the Attorney General's building in Richmond. She kept the door closed, spoke only to her chief of staff and her executive assistant, both of whom had been sworn to secrecy about her location on Monday. The press release announcing her appointment was scheduled for the following Monday. 5 more days of anonymity. 5 more days to gather evidence before Whitmore and his allies learned who they'd been dealing with. She reviewed the complaints Marcus Delane had filed. 3 over 8 months, each one more detailed than the last, each one dismissed with the same boilerplate language. Insufficient evidence of pattern or practice. Complainant advised to seek legal counsel if issues persist. The dismissals had been signed by Jefferson County's court administrator, a position that reported directly to the presiding judge, to Vernon Whitmore. Victoria pulled the financial records next. Campaign contributions to local officials, bar association donations, country club memberships. The pattern was clear. Whitmore wasn't just a judge, he was the hub of a network. Legal fees flowed through preferred attorneys like Wells Ogilvy. Court appointments went to connected counsel. Defendants with money and connections got reduced sentences. Defendants without got the full weight of a system designed to crush them. And at the center of it all, a man in black robes who believed no one was watching. Thursday brought a complication. Victoria arrived at her office to find her chief of staff waiting outside her door. Pamela Reeves, 20 years in government, unshakable under pressure, currently looking very shaken. We have a problem. What kind? Someone's asking about you. a journalist from the Richmond Herald. She called 3 times yesterday. Wanted to know when the Attorney General appointment would be announced. Specifically mentioned that no photos of you have been released yet. Victoria felt the familiar tightening in her chest. What did you tell her? Standard response. The governor's office will make an announcement when the transition is complete. No additional comment. Did she buy it? Hard to say. Pamela hesitated. She also asked about Jefferson County, whether the AG's office had any pending investigations in that jurisdiction. Victoria went still. What's her name? Cassandra Mercer, investigative reporter. She's good. Broke the story on the DMV kickback scandal last year. Is she connected to anyone at the courthouse? I don't know. But if she's digging... Pamela's voice trailed off. Victoria made a decision. Find out what she knows. Quietly. Don't confirm anything, but find out where her information is coming from. And if she publishes before Monday? Then we accelerate. But let's hope it doesn't come to that. Friday morning, 7 a.m. Victoria pulled into the Jefferson County Courthouse parking lot for the second time that week. The sky was overcast, gray clouds pressing low over the white columns and the Confederate memorial no one had removed. Victoria sat in her car for 5 minutes, reviewing her notes, preparing for what was coming. The appeal hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. Judge Whitmore presiding, the same judge she'd challenged on Monday, the same judge who'd had his bailiff put her in handcuffs. Under normal circumstances, a defendant could request a different judge for their appeal. Victoria hadn't. She wanted him. She wanted to sit in that courtroom one more time, to document his behavior with fresh eyes, to give him every opportunity to demonstrate the pattern she was building a case around. And then, when the moment was right, she wanted to watch his face when he learned who she really was. She gathered her materials, left the encrypted phone locked in her glove compartment, too risky to carry it inside, took only her personal phone, her leather folder, and the canvas tote bag. At 7:15 a.m., she walked through the courthouse entrance. Security was different this time. Gage Combs wasn't at the checkpoint. A different bailiff, younger, less hostile, waved her through the metal detector without comment. Victoria collected her bag and headed for the clerk's window. Lila Maddox was there. Same reading glasses, same expression of perpetual inconvenience. But something in her posture had changed. She looked up when Victoria approached, immediately, without the deliberate delay from Monday. Holloway? Yes, appeal hearing at 9 a.m. Maddox typed something, frowned at her screen. You're not on the docket. Victoria pulled out her appeal notice. I filed on Monday, received confirmation that same day. The system doesn't show it. Then there's an error in the system. The confirmation number is right here. Maddox studied the paper. Her frown deepened. Wait here. She disappeared through a door behind the counter. Victoria waited. 3 minutes. 5. When Maddox returned, she wasn't alone. Wells Ogilvy walked beside her, still wearing the expensive charcoal suit, still carrying the thin briefcase. His expression was harder to read this time, less confident, more watchful. Ms. Holloway. He approached the window. I understand there's been some confusion about your appeal. No confusion. I filed on Monday. The hearing was scheduled for today. Yes, well. He smiled tightly. It seems there was a processing error. Your appeal has been postponed. Postponed until when? Until a date to be determined. You'll receive notice by mail. Victoria felt the familiar pressure building in her chest. Stay calm. Document everything. Mr. Ogilvy, I'd like to speak with the court administrator about this scheduling issue. I'm afraid that's not possible. The administrator is in meetings all day. Then I'd like to file a formal complaint about the delay. You're welcome to do that. His smile widened slightly. Although I should warn you, complaints about scheduling are rarely successful, especially when the complainant doesn't have an attorney. The same words Whitmore had used on Monday. Maybe bring a real lawyer next time, sweetheart. Victoria reached into her folder. I have documentation of a pattern of scheduling irregularities in this courthouse. Defendants of color being systematically delayed. Files being moved from the top of stacks to the bottom. Cases called out of order based on factors other than arrival time. Ogilvy's smile froze. Ms. Holloway, I'm not sure what you think you've observed. I've observed enough, and I'm prepared to take my observations to the appropriate authorities. Silence. Ogilvy's eyes moved over her face, searching for something. A tell, a weakness, a crack in her composure. What authorities would those be, Ms. Holloway? Victoria let the question hang in the air. The appropriate ones. She turned and walked away from the window. Behind her, she heard Ogilvy's voice, low, urgent, speaking to someone she couldn't see. Find out who she is, now. Victoria didn't leave the courthouse. She found a seat in the waiting area near courtroom 4B and settled in to watch the morning docket. Same patterns, same discrimination, same systematic machinery grinding through its daily work of injustice. At 8:45 a.m., the courtroom doors opened for the morning session. At 8:50 a.m., Vernon Whitmore took the bench. His eyes swept the gallery, found Victoria in the back row, and stopped. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Whitmore turned to his clerk. Ms. Maddox, who's first on the docket? The morning proceeded. Cases were called. Defendants rose and fell. Victoria documented everything in her small notebook: times, names, outcomes, the specific language Whitmore used to humiliate and control. At 9:30 a.m., something changed. A woman entered the courtroom. Mid-40s, professional dress, carrying a reporter's notebook. She slipped into the gallery and sat down 3 seats away from Victoria. Cassandra Mercer, the investigative reporter from the Richmond Herald. Victoria felt her pulse quicken. This wasn't coincidence. Someone had told Mercer to be here, someone who knew that something significant was happening in Jefferson County Traffic Court. Mercer glanced at Victoria. A flicker of recognition crossed her face, though Victoria couldn't tell what she'd recognized. The woman from Monday's incident? Or something more? They didn't speak. Victoria returned her attention to the proceedings. At 10:15 a.m., Whitmore called a recess. 15 minutes, he said. Then we'll continue with the remaining cases. He disappeared through the side door. Victoria rose and walked toward the restroom. Cassandra Mercer followed. The women's restroom was empty except for the 2 of them. Mercer checked under each stall door. Satisfied they were alone, she turned to Victoria. You're the one from Monday, the woman who cited the 14th Amendment in traffic court. Victoria said nothing. I've been covering this courthouse for 3 years. I've never seen anyone stand up to Whitmore like that, not even the public defenders. Still nothing. Mercer's voice dropped. I know there's a new attorney general. No one's seen her face yet. No photos, no press conferences. The governor's keeping her under wraps until the announcement. Victoria's expression didn't change. I also know that 14 complaints have been filed against this courthouse in the past 3 years, all dismissed by internal review. And I know the complaints came from a court reporter who's been documenting patterns of discrimination for 8 months. Mercer stepped closer. Here's what I don't know. Why would a defendant in a traffic case sit in the gallery all day taking notes? Why would Wells Ogilvy, the most connected attorney in Jefferson County, personally intervene to delay her appeal? And why would Judge Vernon Whitmore look at that defendant like she's a bomb about to go off? Victoria met her eyes. Ms. Mercer, I appreciate your interest, but I'm just a citizen contesting a speeding ticket. No, you're not. Mercer's voice was flat. I don't know who you are yet, but I will. And when I do, I'm going to write a story that blows this courthouse wide open. She walked to the door, paused with her hand on the handle. One more thing. Whitmore's been making calls all morning. To the county executive, to the state party chairman, to someone at the governor's office. He's scared, Ms. Holloway, and scared men do dangerous things. She left. Victoria stood alone in the empty restroom, staring at her reflection in the mirror. The timeline was accelerating. Mercer was digging. Whitmore was panicking. And somewhere, a leak was feeding information to people who shouldn't have it. 3 more days until the announcement. 3 more days of anonymity. She wasn't sure she had 3 more hours. Mosso. 11 a.m. Victoria returned to the gallery. The morning session had resumed. Whitmore was presiding over a case, another black defendant, another self-represented citizen being systematically denied her rights. But something was different now. Whitmore's demeanor had changed. The casual cruelty from Monday was gone, replaced by something more careful, more controlled. He was performing for an audience he couldn't see, or maybe an audience he suspected was watching. The reporter, the complaints, the defendant who wouldn't go away. He's scared. Victoria watched him call 2 more cases. Both were handled with unusual fairness. Reasonable sentences, opportunities to present evidence, no humiliation. At 11:45 a.m., Whitmore called a lunch recess. Court will resume at 1 p.m., he announced. All remaining cases will be heard this afternoon. He rose from the bench, paused. Ms. Holloway. Everyone in the gallery turned to look at her. Please remain after dismissal. I'd like to discuss your appeal scheduling. Murmurs from the crowd. Victoria nodded once. Yes, Your Honor. The gallery emptied. Victoria remained in her seat. The court reporter, Marcus Delane, lingered at his station, fingers still poised over the stenotype keys. Mr. Delane, Whitmore's voice was sharp. You're dismissed. Delane hesitated. His eyes met Victoria's for just a moment, a silent question. She gave the smallest shake of her head. Go. He gathered his equipment and left. The courtroom doors closed. Victoria was alone with Judge Vernon Whitmore. Whitmore descended from the bench. His black robe whispered against the floor as he walked toward the gallery, slowly, deliberately, maintaining the performance of authority even without an audience. Ms. Holloway? He stopped 3 feet away. You've been quite persistent. I'm contesting a traffic citation, Your Honor. That's my right. It is. He nodded slowly. But we both know this isn't about a traffic citation anymore. Victoria said nothing. You've been watching my courtroom for 2 days, taking notes, speaking to my staff, asking questions about scheduling practices. He paused. Questions that suggest you're not just an ordinary defendant. I'm not sure what you mean. I think you do. Whitmore moved closer. Close enough that she could smell his aftershave. Something expensive, applied too heavily. I've been on this bench for 28 years. I've seen all kinds of people walk through those doors. Defendants, attorneys, activists, troublemakers. His voice dropped. And every now and then, I see someone different. Someone who doesn't fit. Someone who's playing a longer game than the rest. Victoria held his gaze. What game would that be, Your Honor? That's what I'm trying to figure out. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Wells tells me you mentioned appropriate authorities, that you have documentation of irregularities, that you threaten to take your complaints somewhere outside this courthouse. I stated facts, Your Honor. I didn't make threats. Facts. He laughed softly. Facts are what I say they are in this courtroom. That's how it works. That's how it's always worked. He reached out, slowly, casually, and took the leather folder from her hands. Victoria didn't resist. She'd been expecting this. Whitmore opened the folder, leafed through the contents. Traffic citation. Photographs. Court notices. The handwritten note from Marcus Delane. He stopped at the note. Read it. His expression didn't change. This is from my court reporter. It was given to me. By someone who's been filing complaints about me for 8 months. Complaints that have been investigated and dismissed. He closed the folder. Do you know what happens to court employees who share confidential information with defendants? That note isn't confidential. It's a personal communication. Everything in my courthouse is confidential. Whitmore stepped closer, including you. Victoria felt the wall of the gallery bench pressing against her back. She hadn't realized she'd been retreating. Your Honor? She kept her voice steady. I'd like my folder returned. In a moment. He set the folder on the bench beside him. First, I want to know who you really are, where you came from, what you're actually doing here. I'm a citizen contesting a traffic citation. No. He shook his head. You're something else. I can feel it. The way you speak, the way you carry yourself, the way you looked at me on Monday, like you were measuring me for something. He leaned in close. Too close. So here's what's going to happen, Ms. Holloway. You're going to tell me who sent you. You're going to give me the names of everyone you've been talking to. And then you're going to walk out of this courthouse and never come back. And if I refuse? Then I'll have Bailiff Combs escort you to a holding cell, interfering with court operations, harassment of court personnel, trespassing. He smiled. I can make this very uncomfortable for you, more uncomfortable than you can possibly imagine. Victoria didn't look away. You've made a lot of people uncomfortable, Your Honor. For 28 years, black defendants, Hispanic defendants, anyone who walked into your courtroom without money or connections or the right kind of face. Whitmore's smile froze. I've seen your pattern, Your Honor. The extended wait times, the denied motions, the fines that increase when someone asks a question you don't like, the contempt findings that appear and disappear depending on who's watching. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about, and so does the Department of Justice. Silence. Victoria watched the color drain from Whitmore's face. What did you say? The Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division. They've been receiving complaints about Jefferson County Traffic Court for 3 years. 14 complaints, all describing the same patterns, all dismissed by your internal review process. She paused. All now under federal investigation. You're lying. Am I? Victoria reached for her folder. Whitmore didn't stop her. Check your email, Your Honor. The formal notification should arrive by end of business today. Pattern or practice investigation, pursuant to 42 U.S.C. Section 14141. Whitmore stood motionless. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. Who are you? Victoria tucked the folder under her arm. You'll find out soon enough. She walked past him toward the courtroom doors. Her footsteps echoed in the empty space, steady, unhurried, confident. Behind her, Whitmore's voice cracked. This isn't over, Ms. Holloway. Whoever you are, whatever you think you're doing, this is my courthouse, my county. You have no idea what you've started. Victoria paused at the door. Actually, Your Honor, I know exactly what I've started. She pushed through the doors and walked into the hallway. Behind her, she heard a sound, something between a shout and a sob. A gavel hitting wood, again and again, in an empty courtroom. The sound of a man who'd just realized his kingdom was burning. The hallway was empty. Victoria walked toward the exit, her pace controlled, her expression neutral. Inside, her heart was racing. The confrontation had escalated faster than planned, revealed more than intended. Whitmore now knew that federal authorities were involved. He would call his contacts, mobilize his allies, try to get ahead of the investigation. Good. Let him panic. Let him make mistakes. Let him show his network how he operated under pressure. She was almost to the security checkpoint when she heard footsteps behind her. Ms. Holloway. She turned. Gage Combs stood in the middle of the hallway. He must have been waiting nearby, listening perhaps, or summoned by Whitmore during their conversation. Building's not closed yet. His voice was different now, harder. But you're leaving anyway. Yes. Judge wants to talk to you again. He already talked to me. I'm done. Combs smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. That's not how this works. When Judge Whitmore says he wants to talk to someone, they talk. Doesn't matter if they're done. Victoria didn't move. Am I being detained, bailiff? Not yet. Then I'm free to leave. She turned toward the exit. His hand closed around her arm. This time there was no hesitation, no warning grip. His fingers dug into her bicep hard enough to leave marks, hard enough that she gasped. You're not going anywhere. Victoria spun, a movement so fast it caught Combs off guard. Her free hand came up, knocking his grip loose. She stepped back, creating distance, her body dropping into a stance that looked like self-defense because it was self-defense. Combs stared at her. How did you— Don't touch me again. Lady, you just assaulted an officer. I defended myself from unlawful restraint. There's a difference. She reached for her bag. Combs moved faster. He grabbed her shoulders, spun her around, slammed her against the wall. The impact knocked the breath from her lungs. Her bag fell to the floor, contents scattering, the leather folder sliding across the tile. Hands on the wall. Victoria complied, not because she was afraid, but because she needed this, needed him to escalate, needed the evidence of what men like Combs did when they thought no one was watching. She heard the metallic click of handcuffs being removed from his belt. You're under arrest. On what charge? Assault on a peace officer, resisting arrest, trespassing. I didn't assault anyone. I removed your hand from my arm after you grabbed me without cause. That's not how it's going to read in my report. The handcuff closed around her right wrist, cold, tight. Bailiff Combs. Victoria's voice was steady despite the pressure of the wall against her chest. I am documenting everything you do, every word, every action, every violation of my constitutional rights. Document all you want. He grabbed her left wrist, twisted it behind her back. No one's going to believe you. The second handcuff clicked shut. Victoria closed her eyes. In 3 days, she would stand at a podium in Richmond and announce her appointment as Attorney General of Virginia. In 3 days, she would begin the process of dismantling the network that had protected Vernon Whitmore for 28 years. But first, she would spend the night in a Jefferson County holding cell. First, she would feel the weight of the system she was fighting, not as an observer, but as a target. Some lessons could only be learned from the inside. Take me to booking, she said. Combs laughed. Don't worry, sweetheart. That's exactly where you're going. The holding cell was 7 feet by 9 feet. Concrete walls, metal bench, a toilet in the corner with no privacy screen. Victoria sat on the bench with her back straight and her hands folded in her lap. The handcuffs were gone, removed during booking, but her wrists still ached where the metal had pressed too tight. It was 6:30 p.m. She'd been in this cell for 4 hours. No phone call. That was her right. One phone call within a reasonable time after arrest. But Combs had explained that reasonable time was up to the discretion of the arresting officer, and his discretion said she could wait. Victoria didn't argue. She was gathering evidence, every minute of delay, every procedural violation, every word Combs had said during the arrest. She memorized it all, stored it away for the report she would write, the testimony she would give, the case she would build. The cell door opened. Wells Ogilvy stood in the doorway. His expression was complicated, triumph mixed with something else. Concern, maybe, or confusion. Ms. Holloway. He stepped inside. The door closed behind him. I have to say, when Gage told me what happened, I didn't believe him at first. A woman who cites the Constitution getting arrested for assault. It seemed too convenient. Victoria didn't respond. But here you are. He gestured at the cell. In custody, facing charges that could mean real jail time, not just a contempt finding, but actual criminal prosecution. The charges are fabricated. Bailiff Combs grabbed me without lawful cause. I defended myself. That's not how he remembers it. That's not how it happened. Ogilvy smiled. In this county, Ms. Holloway, what happened and what gets remembered are often two different things. The question is, which version do you want on the record? Victoria studied him. What are you offering? A way out. He sat down on the bench beside her, close, but not touching, performing reasonableness. The charges get dropped. Your traffic citation gets dismissed. You walk out of here tonight, no record, no consequences. In exchange for what? Information. His voice dropped. I know you're not just a defendant. The way you handled yourself in that courtroom, the things you said to Judge Whitmore, the federal investigation you mentioned, none of that came from a YouTube video about beating traffic tickets. I did my research. You did more than research. He leaned closer. Someone sent you here. Someone with resources. Someone who wants to take down Vernon Whitmore and everyone connected to him. Victoria said nothing. I want to know who, Ogilvy continued, and I want to know what you've already told them. Names, documents, whatever you've gathered over the past 2 days. Give me that information, and you walk free tonight. And if I refuse? Then you spend the weekend in county jail. Monday, you go before a judge. Not Whitmore, obviously, but one of his colleagues. The charges stick. Your life becomes very complicated. He paused. And whoever sent you here? They find out that their asset got burned, that their investigation is compromised, that everything they planned has to start over from scratch. Victoria let the silence stretch. Then she spoke. You're scared. Ogilvy blinked. Excuse me? You're scared. All of you. Whitmore, Maddox, Combs, and you. You've been running this courthouse like a private enterprise for years, skimming from defendants, trading favors, protecting each other. And suddenly someone shows up who doesn't fit the pattern, someone who pushes back, someone who mentions the Department of Justice. She turned to face him fully. You don't know who I am. You don't know what I've already documented. You don't know how deep the federal investigation goes, and it's eating you alive. Ogilvy's expression hardened. You're making a mistake, Ms. Holloway. No. Victoria's voice was quiet but absolute. You made the mistake. 28 years ago, when Vernon Whitmore took that bench. Every day since then, every case, every defendant you crushed, every complaint you buried, all of it was a mistake. And now it's catching up to you. Ogilvy stood. Last chance. Victoria looked at him with something close to pity. Your last chance was 3 years ago, Mr. Ogilvy, when Marcus Delane filed his first complaint. You could have listened. You could have changed. Instead, you dismissed it, called it insufficient evidence, protected your friend. She paused. Now it's too late. Ogilvy walked to the cell door, knocked once. It opened. Enjoy your weekend, Ms. Holloway. His voice was cold. When this is over, I hope you remember. You were offered a way out. You chose not to take it. He left. The door slammed shut. Victoria sat alone in the concrete cell, listening to his footsteps fade. 3 days. That's all she needed. 3 days until the announcement. 3 days until everything changed. She could survive 3 days. Saturday morning came gray and cold. Victoria woke on the metal bench with her coat folded under her head as a pillow. She'd slept maybe 3 hours, the lights never went off in the holding area, and there was no way to track time except by counting the meals they pushed through the slot. 2 meals meant 1 night. She had 2 more nights to go. At some point during the morning, a guard came to her cell. Different from Combs, older, with tired eyes and a uniform that didn't quite fit. You got a visitor. Victoria frowned. I wasn't informed of any visitor request. Take it or leave it. She took it. The visitor room was a small space with a metal table and 2 chairs. Victoria sat on one side, hands folded, waiting. The door opened. Marcus Delane walked in. He looked like he hadn't slept. His clothes were rumpled, his eyes red-rimmed. He sat down across from her without speaking. Mr. Delane? Victoria kept her voice neutral. Anyone could be listening. I didn't expect to see you here. They're going to destroy the records. Victoria went still. What records? Everything. The docket logs, the sign-in sheets, The transcripts from the past 3 years. Whitmore ordered it this morning. Called it a routine archive purge. Delane's voice cracked. He knows something's coming. He's trying to get rid of the evidence before it can be used against him. Victoria's mind raced. How do you know this? Because I'm the one who archives the transcripts. They told me to delete everything before 2022, said it was storage optimization. He laughed bitterly. 28 years of records. Everything that proves what he's been doing. Gone by Monday morning. Can you make copies? I already tried. The system locked me out this morning. New security protocols. Only administrators have access now. He leaned forward. Ms. Holloway, whoever you are, I need you to understand something. I've been trying to stop this for 8 months. 3 complaints, all dismissed. I thought maybe if I kept documenting, kept records, eventually someone would listen. Someone did listen. But not in time. His eyes were desperate. If those records get destroyed, there's no pattern, no proof, just my word against his. And my word doesn't mean anything in this county. Victoria reached across the table, took his hand. Mr. Delane, Marcus, I need you to trust me. He looked at her. In 3 days, everything changes. I can't tell you how. I can't tell you who I am or what's coming. But I need you to know that the records you've kept, the transcripts, the observations, the complaints you filed, all of it matters. Even if Whitmore destroys the courthouse copies, your documentation exists. It's already been received. It's already been reviewed by people who have the power to act on it. How do you know that? Because I made sure of it. Silence. Delane stared at her. Who are you? Victoria squeezed his hand. I'm the person who read your complaints. All 3 of them. I'm the person who saw the pattern you documented, the wait times, the fine disparities, the systematic humiliation of defendants who looked like us. Her voice dropped. And I'm the person who's going to make sure that Vernon Whitmore never harms another defendant in his courtroom. Delane's eyes filled with tears. I thought no one was listening. I know. Victoria released his hand, sat back. But you have to hold on a little longer. 3 more days. Can you do that? He nodded slowly. 3 more days. And Marcus? She caught his eye. Whatever happens with those records, don't do anything that puts yourself at risk. You've already done enough, more than enough. Let me handle the rest. He stood, walked to the door, paused. I don't know who you are, Ms. Holloway, but I hope you're everything I think you might be. He left. Victoria sat alone in the visitor room, staring at the empty chair across from her. 2 more days. She could survive 2 more days. Sunday evening, 8 p.m. Victoria was back in her cell when the door opened again. This time, it was Gage Combs. He was smiling. Good news, Ms. Holloway. You're free to go. She didn't move. What happened to the charges? Dropped. He said it like it pained him. DA reviewed the case, determined there was insufficient evidence for prosecution. Just like that. Just like that. His smile tightened. Someone made some calls. I don't know who, I don't know why, but you're walking out of here tonight. Victoria stood slowly. And my personal belongings? At the desk. Sign for them on your way out. She walked past him toward the door. Stopped. Bailiff Combs. He looked at her. What happened in this hallway on Friday? The way you grabbed me, the things you said, the arrest without cause, all of it is documented. By me. By witnesses who saw what happened. By cameras I suspect you forgot were operational. His smile disappeared. The charges may be dropped, but the conduct isn't forgotten. What happens next? That's not up to the DA. She left him standing in the hallway. At the front desk, she signed for her belongings. Bag, phone, wallet, leather folder. Everything present. Everything intact. She stepped outside the Jefferson County Courthouse for the last time as an anonymous citizen. Tomorrow, everything changed. Monday morning broke clear and cold over Richmond. Victoria stood at her bathroom mirror at 5:30 a.m., studying the face that would appear on every news channel in the state by noon. The bruises on her wrists had faded to yellow-green shadows, visible if you knew where to look, invisible under the sleeves of her blazer. She'd chosen carefully today, not the plain navy from Jefferson County. This blazer was charcoal gray with the state seal embroidered on the lapel, matching slacks, low heels that clicked with authority on marble floors. The leather folder sat on her kitchen counter, the same one she'd carried into Whitmore's courtroom, now joined by a second folder. This one contained the formal documentation of her weekend: arrest report, booking photograph, inventory of personal effects seized, evidence of what happened when a black woman challenged power in Jefferson County. Her encrypted phone buzzed. A text from Pamela Reeves. Press assembled. Governor arriving 11:45. You're on at noon. Victoria typed back. Confirmed. Then we move. She gathered both folders, checked her reflection one final time, and walked out the door. Chateau. The Attorney General's building occupied a corner of Capitol Square in downtown Richmond. Victoria arrived at 7 a.m. through the underground parking entrance, a route designed to avoid the press already gathering on the front steps. Her office was on the 6th floor, corner suite, windows overlooking the Capitol building where Governor Stanton would introduce her in 5 hours. Pamela was waiting at the door. You look like you slept in a jail cell. I did sleep in a jail cell. I know. I got the call Saturday morning. Pamela's expression was tight. We almost pulled you out. The governor wanted to send state police. I told her not to. She told me, said you were very specific about staying in custody until charges were dropped. Pamela followed her into the office. Was it worth it? Victoria set her folders on the desk. Gage Combs arrested me without probable cause, slammed me against a wall, put me in handcuffs tight enough to leave marks. She rolled up her sleeve, showing the faded bruises. Wells Ogilvy visited me in my cell and offered to make the charges disappear in exchange for information about the federal investigation. Vernon Whitmore authorized the destruction of 3 years of court records to cover his tracks. She looked at Pamela. Yes, it was worth it. Good. The morning passed in preparation. Victoria reviewed her statement 3 times, memorized the key points, practiced the delivery until every word felt natural, unrehearsed, authentic. At 10 a.m., Patricia Monroe called from Washington. We're ready on our end. The formal notification letter will be delivered to Whitmore at 2 p.m. today. Simultaneously, we're issuing preservation orders for all court records, docket logs, and personnel files. If he destroyed anything over the weekend, we'll find out. He tried. Marcus Delane told me Saturday morning. Delane's the court reporter? Yes. He's been documenting for 8 months. 3 complaints, all dismissed by internal review. Victoria paused. He thought no one was listening. Well, Monroe's voice softened. Someone was. What's our timeline? Preliminary investigation phase, 60 to 90 days. If we find what we expect to find, we move to formal pattern or practice findings. That triggers the consent decree process, negotiations with the county about reform measures, oversight, compliance monitoring. And Whitmore personally? That depends on what the evidence shows. If we can prove he knowingly violated defendants' constitutional rights, we're looking at potential criminal referral under 18 U.S.C. Section 242, but that's a high bar. More likely outcome is removal from the bench through state judicial conduct proceedings. Victoria nodded. I want to be there when he finds out. Beware. Jefferson County, this afternoon, when the notification letter arrives. Monroe was quiet for a moment. Victoria, you spent the weekend in his jail. You were a defendant in his court. Your personal involvement is exactly why I need to be there. Victoria's voice hardened. He looked at me like I was nothing, like I was just another black woman who didn't know her place. I want him to see my face when he learns who I really am. That's not how federal investigations work. I'm not asking to investigate. I'm asking to observe. As Attorney General of Virginia, I have every right to be present when federal authorities deliver official correspondence to a state court judge. Another pause. Fine. But you stay in the background. The DOJ team handles the notification. You're there as a witness, nothing more. Understood. Victoria ended the call. In 3 hours, Vernon Whitmore would learn that the woman he'd mocked, arrested, and threatened was the highest law enforcement officer in the Commonwealth of Virginia. She intended to see his face when he did. If you're still here, hit subscribe. The reveal is coming, and you don't want to miss it. 11:45 a.m. The press conference. Governor Patricia Stanton approached the podium in the Capitol Rotunda. Behind her, a row of officials, cabinet members, legislative leaders, the outgoing Attorney General Marcus Webb. And at the end of the row, standing slightly apart, Victoria Holloway. The cameras focused on Stanton. The journalists leaned forward. The moment had been building for 3 weeks, ever since Webb's sudden resignation amid rumors of health problems and political pressure. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, Stanton's voice echoed through the rotunda. Thank you for joining us today. As you know, Attorney General Marcus Webb stepped down from his position on September 25th, citing personal reasons. I want to thank Marcus for his years of service to this Commonwealth. Polite applause. Webb nodded acknowledgement. Today, I am proud to announce his successor. Stanton turned toward Victoria. Victoria Holloway is a graduate of Howard University School of Law. She served 12 years as a federal prosecutor in the Eastern District of Virginia, where she specialized in civil rights enforcement and public corruption cases. She has argued before the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals 11 times and won 11 times. Victoria stepped forward. The cameras pivoted. More importantly, Stanton continued, Victoria Holloway understands that justice in Virginia must be equal justice, that our courts must serve all citizens, not just those with money and connections, that the rule of law means nothing if it protects the powerful while crushing the vulnerable. The governor extended her hand. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the 63rd Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Victoria took her place at the podium. The lights were bright. The cameras clicked. She looked out at the assembled press and saw Cassandra Mercer in the front row, notebook open, eyes sharp with recognition. Thank you, Governor Stanton. Victoria's voice was steady. I am honored to accept this appointment, and I am humbled by the trust you have placed in me. She paused. Let the moment settle. I want to begin my tenure with a promise. As Attorney General, I will fight for equal justice under law, not as an abstract principle, but as a living reality in every courtroom, every police station, every corner of this Commonwealth where citizens interact with their government. Another pause. And I want to make an announcement. Effective immediately, the Office of the Attorney General is opening a formal investigation into allegations of discriminatory practices at the Jefferson County Traffic Court. This investigation is being conducted in coordination with the Civil Rights Division of the United States Department of Justice. Murmurs from the press. Hands shot up. Mercer was already writing. I will take a few questions. The first came from a reporter in the second row. Attorney General Holloway, can you tell us what prompted this investigation? The investigation was prompted by 14 formal complaints filed over the past 3 years, alleging systematic discrimination in case scheduling, sentencing, and treatment of defendants based on race and socioeconomic status. These complaints were dismissed by internal review processes within the courthouse. The Attorney General's office has determined that an independent investigation is warranted. Do you have any personal connection to Jefferson County? Victoria met the reporter's eyes. I do. Last week I appeared in Jefferson County Traffic Court as a defendant in a minor traffic matter. I was denied the opportunity to present evidence. I was threatened with contempt for citing my constitutional rights. I was physically restrained by a bailiff and subsequently arrested on fabricated charges. Gasps from the crowd. More hands. I spent the weekend in a Jefferson County holding cell. The charges were dropped yesterday, not because they lacked merit, but because someone realized that arresting the incoming Attorney General might create problems. She let that sink in. I tell you this not to make myself a victim. I tell you this because what happened to me happens to defendants in that courthouse every single day. Black defendants, Hispanic defendants, poor defendants, anyone who walks through those doors without money, without connections, without the right kind of face. Her voice hardened. That ends now. The press conference lasted another 20 minutes. Victoria answered questions about her priorities, her timeline, her approach to the investigation. She declined to name specific individuals under scrutiny. The investigation will follow the evidence wherever it leads, but anyone paying attention could read between the lines. By 1 p.m., she was in a black SUV heading south on I-95 toward Jefferson County. Patricia Monroe sat beside her in the back seat. 2 federal marshals occupied the front. A second vehicle followed with additional DOJ personnel and a court reporter who would document the notification. "You know this is unusual," Monroe said. "I know. State attorneys general don't typically accompany federal investigators on notification visits." "I'm not typical." Monroe smiled slightly. "No, you're not." They drove in silence for a while. The Virginia countryside rolled past. Farms, forests, the occasional small town with a Confederate flag still flying from someone's porch. "What do you think he'll do?" Monroe asked. "Whitmore?" "Yes." Victoria considered the question. "He'll be angry, defensive. He'll claim political persecution, say the investigation is retaliation for a traffic ticket. He'll call his lawyers, call his contacts, try to get ahead of the story. And then? And then he'll realize it doesn't matter. The evidence exists. The pattern is documented. The federal government doesn't care about his connections in Jefferson County." She paused. "That's when the fear will hit. You've thought about this a lot. I've thought about nothing else for 3 weeks. The SUV turned off the highway onto the county road that led to Jefferson County. Victoria watched the speed limit signs pass. 35, then 25 near the school zone, then 35 again. Riverside Boulevard, Miller Creek Bridge, the spot where Deputy R. Sloan had pulled her over 25 days ago. "That's where it started," she said, pointing. Monroe followed her gaze. "The traffic stop?" "Yes, I was doing 38 in a 35 zone. He wrote me up for 47 in a 25, falsified the citation to inflate the charges. That's the kind of thing we can prove. Radar records, calibration logs, the actual posted speed limit." "I know." Victoria turned back to face forward. "But it's not about the ticket anymore. It never was." 1:55 p.m. The Jefferson County Courthouse. The SUV pulled into the parking lot. Victoria saw the white columns, the Confederate memorial, the same entrance she'd walked through 4 times in the past week. Everything was about to change. "Ready?" Monroe asked. "Ready." They walked through the front doors together. The security checkpoint was staffed by the same young bailiff who'd been there Friday morning, not Gage Combs, but someone who recognized Victoria's face and went pale. "Ma'am, the metal detector." "We're federal officers." Monroe showed her credentials. "We have an appointment with Judge Whitmore." The bailiff looked at Victoria, looked at the state seal on her blazer, looked back at Monroe. I'll let them know you're here." He disappeared through a side door. Victoria and the DOJ team waited in the lobby. The courthouse was quiet. Monday afternoon, light docket, most of the morning's cases already resolved. 2 minutes passed. 3. The side door opened. Gage Combs walked out. He stopped when he saw Victoria. His face cycled through several expressions: recognition, confusion, something that might have been fear. "Ms. Holloway." "Bailiff Combs." "I thought you were—" "Released. I was. Yesterday." She stepped forward. This is Assistant Attorney General Patricia Monroe from the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. We're here to deliver official notification to Judge Whitmore. Combs's eyes moved to Monroe, to the federal marshals flanking her, back to Victoria. What kind of notification? That's between us and the judge. Monroe's voice was clipped. Please inform him that we're here. Combs hesitated. He's in his chambers. He doesn't like to be disturbed during... He'll want to be disturbed for this. Victoria's voice was ice. Tell him the Attorney General of Virginia is here, and that she brought friends. Combs went pale. He turned and walked toward the chamber's door. His footsteps echoed in the empty hallway. Victoria waited. This was the moment she'd been building toward for 3 weeks. 25 days since the traffic stop. 10 days since she'd first walked into courtroom 4B. 3 days since she'd sat in a holding cell wondering if she'd made the right choice. The chamber's door opened. Vernon Whitmore stepped out. He looked older than he had on Friday. The weekend had not been kind to him. Dark circles under his eyes, a pallor beneath his normally ruddy complexion, the slightly disheveled appearance of a man who'd been making desperate phone calls for 72 hours. His eyes found Victoria. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Whitmore laughed. It was a hollow sound, nothing like the cruel amusement he'd displayed in the courtroom. So, his voice was rough, you're the new Attorney General. I am. And everything that happened last week, the traffic ticket, the courtroom appearance, the arrest, was real. All of it. Victoria stepped closer. Every word I said was true. Every constitutional right I cited was valid. Every violation I documented was genuine. You set me up. I observed you, Your Honor. There's a difference. She gestured toward Monroe. This is Assistant Attorney General Patricia Monroe from the DOJ Civil Rights Division. She has something to deliver. Monroe stepped forward with a manila envelope. Judge Vernon Whitmore. This letter serves as formal notification that the United States Department of Justice has opened a pattern or practice investigation into the Jefferson County Traffic Court pursuant to 42 U.S.C. Section 14141. The investigation will examine allegations of discriminatory practices in case scheduling, sentencing, and treatment of defendants based on race, color, and national origin. She handed him the envelope. Additionally, we are issuing a preservation order for all court records, docket logs, personnel files, and electronic communications from January 2021 to present. Any destruction, alteration, or concealment of these materials may constitute obstruction of justice under 18 U.S.C. Section 1519. Whitmore didn't open the envelope. He just stared at it like it might bite him. This is insane. His voice cracked. You can't. I've been on this bench for 28 years. 28 years of service. And you're telling me that because some woman didn't like how I handled her traffic ticket? This isn't about my traffic ticket, Your Honor. Victoria's voice cut through his protest. This is about 14 complaints filed over 3 years. This is about a court reporter who documented discriminatory patterns for 8 months. This is about defendants who waited hours while others were called ahead of them. This is about fines that doubled when someone asked a question you didn't like. She stepped closer. This is about a system that crushed people because they had no power to fight back. And now that system is under investigation. Whitmore's face went red. You don't know what you're doing. You don't understand how things work in this county. The people I know, the connections I have, your connections can't help you, Your Honor. This is a federal investigation. Your friends in the county government, your allies in the state party, whoever you called over the weekend, none of them have jurisdiction over what happens next. I'll fight this. His voice rose. I'll hire the best lawyers in the state. I'll go to the press. You'll do whatever you feel you need to do. Victoria's voice was calm, almost gentle. But while you're doing it, I want you to remember something. She held his gaze. 3 days ago, you called me sweetheart. You told me to bring a real lawyer next time. You had your bailiff put his hands on me and arrest me on charges you knew were fabricated. She paused. You thought I was nothing. Just another defendant to humiliate and discard. Just another black woman who didn't know her place. Her voice dropped to a whisper. You were wrong. Shoal. Subscribe now if you want to see what happens when the system finally catches up to him. The notification took 15 minutes. Monroe walked Whitmore through the details, the scope of the investigation, the timeline for document production, his rights and obligations as a subject of federal inquiry. Victoria stood to the side, watching, memorizing every flicker of emotion that crossed his face. Fear, denial, rage, and underneath it all, the slow dawning realization that his world was ending. When it was over, Monroe turned to the federal marshals. Please remain here to oversee the initial document preservation. I want eyes on every file cabinet and computer in this building until our forensic team arrives. The marshals nodded. Victoria turned to leave. Wait! Whitmore's voice stopped her. She turned back. He was standing in the doorway to his chambers, the manila envelope still clutched in his hand. His expression had shifted. The rage was gone, replaced by something more complicated, more human. Why? His voice was quiet. Why did you do it this way? You could have just announced the investigation, sent the letter through normal channels. Why come here yourself? Why let me arrest you? Victoria considered the question. Because I needed to see it for myself, not from reports or complaints or second-hand accounts. I needed to sit in your courtroom and watch you humiliate defendants. I needed to feel your bailiff's hands on my arms. I needed to spend the weekend in your jail, knowing that you thought you'd won. She paused. And I needed you to see me, not as the Attorney General, not as a federal official, as a black woman standing at your podium, citing her constitutional rights, being told to bring a real lawyer next time. Her voice hardened. I needed you to remember that face, because when this investigation is over, when the consent decrees are signed, and the reforms are implemented, and the history books record what happened here, I want you to remember that it started with someone you thought was nothing. She turned and walked away. Behind her she heard Whitmore's voice, broken, barely audible. I was just doing my job. Victoria didn't respond. The drive back to Richmond took 2 hours. Victoria sat in the back of the SUV, watching the countryside pass, processing what had happened. The notification had gone smoothly. Whitmore had been shocked, defensive, but ultimately compliant. No dramatic confrontation, no physical resistance, no last-minute attempt to destroy evidence. Just a man watching his career crumble, one document at a time. Monroe was on her phone for most of the drive, coordinating with the forensic team and the DOJ communications office. The story would break tonight. Federal investigation into Virginia traffic court. New Attorney General personally involved. Allegations of systematic discrimination. By tomorrow morning, Vernon Whitmore's name would be national news. Victoria's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Thank you. M.D. Marcus Delane. The court reporter who'd filed 3 complaints and been ignored. The man who'd slipped her a note in the courthouse hallway and visited her in jail to warn her about the document destruction. She typed back, "This is just the beginning." Another buzz. This time from Cassandra Mercer. "I need an interview. Tonight, if possible." The story is bigger than Whitmore. Victoria frowned. What did Mercer mean by bigger than Whitmore? She typed, "Call my office tomorrow." Call my. We'll arrange something. The SUV pulled into the Attorney General's building parking garage at 4:30 p.m. Pamela Reeves was waiting at the elevator. Press is going crazy. We've got requests from every major outlet in the state, plus CNN, MSNBC, Fox News. The governor's office wants a joint statement, and... She hesitated. And what? Wells Ogilvy's lawyer called. He wants to discuss potential cooperation with the investigation. Victoria stopped walking. Ogilvy wants to cooperate? That's what his lawyer said. Apparently, he has information about, and I'm quoting here, arrangements between court personnel and certain members of the local bar that may be of interest to federal investigators. Victoria felt something cold settle in her stomach. Ogilvy was turning. The man who'd visited her in jail and offered to make her charges disappear was now trying to cut a deal. That meant he was scared. More scared than Whitmore. And that meant the investigation was about to get much more complicated. "Set up a call with Monroe," Victoria said. "Tonight. I want to know everything Ogilvy is offering before we decide whether to take it." "Yes, ma'am." Victoria stepped into the elevator. The doors closed. The story was bigger than Whitmore. She was starting to understand how much bigger. Tuesday morning brought chaos. The story had broken overnight. Every news outlet in Virginia leading with the same headline: "New Attorney General announces federal investigation into courthouse where she was arrested." The details were everywhere: the traffic stop, the courtroom confrontation, the weekend in jail, the dramatic revelation. Victoria spent the morning in meetings, strategy sessions with her senior staff, conference calls with DOJ, a 30-minute conversation with Governor Stanton about managing the political fallout. By noon, she'd done 3 television interviews and declined 12 more. At 1 p.m., Pamela knocked on her office door. "Cassandra Mercer is here. She says it's urgent." Victoria looked up from the document she was reviewing. "Send her in." Mercer entered with her notebook already open. She looked like she hadn't slept. Hair pulled back hastily, coffee stain on her blouse, the slightly manic energy of a reporter who'd stumbled onto something big. "Attorney General, thank you for seeing me. You said it was urgent." "It is." Mercer sat down without being invited. "I've been investigating Jefferson County for 3 years, ever since I noticed the patterns in the court records, the disparities in sentencing, the irregularities in docket management. I filed FOIA requests. I interviewed defendants. I talked to courthouse employees who were afraid to go on record." She leaned forward. "What I found was bigger than one judge." Victoria set down her pen. "Explain." "Whitmore isn't operating alone. He's part of a network. Local attorneys who pay for favorable treatment, court clerks who manipulate dockets in exchange for kickbacks, bailiffs who provide security services for businesses that want to intimidate competitors." Mercer pulled a folder from her bag. "I have documents, financial records, sworn statements from former courthouse employees." She slid the folder across the desk. "Wells Ogilvy is the hub. He's been running a scheme for at least a decade. Attorneys pay him for access to Whitmore. Whitmore delivers favorable rulings. The money flows through a network of shell companies and campaign contributions." Victoria opened the folder, scanned the first few pages. Bank statements, wire transfers, a chart showing connections between Ogilvy, Whitmore, and half a dozen local businesses. "Why haven't you published this?" "Because I couldn't prove intent. I had the financial connections, but I couldn't show that Whitmore knew he was being paid for rulings. The system was designed to maintain deniability. Ogilvy handled the money, Whitmore handled the cases, and they never discussed the arrangement directly." "So what changed?" Mercer smiled grimly. "You. When you walked into that courtroom last week, you triggered something. Whitmore panicked, started making calls, and one of those calls was intercepted by someone who's been helping me." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "Intercepted how?" "I can't reveal my source, but I can tell you that Vernon Whitmore called Wells Ogilvy at 11:47 p.m. on Friday night, 3 hours after your arrest, and he said, quote, 'We need to clean house. Everything from the past 3 years. If they find the arrangement, we're all going down.'" Victoria sat back. "You have a recording of this call?" "My source does. They're willing to provide it to federal investigators in exchange for immunity." "Who's your source?" Mercer hesitated. "Someone inside the courthouse. Someone who's been documenting the corruption for longer than Marcus Delane. Someone who has access to communications that even the DOJ preservation order won't capture." Victoria studied the reporter's face. "Lila Maddox." Mercer didn't confirm or deny, but her expression said everything. "The clerk is your source," Victoria said slowly. "She's been feeding you information while participating in the scheme. She's been trapped in it for 15 years. Ogilvy has leverage on her, something from her past that she can't afford to have exposed. She's been cooperating with him because she had no choice. Mercer's voice softened. When she saw what you did in that courtroom, standing up to Whitmore, getting arrested, refusing to back down, something shifted. She realized there might be a way out. Victoria looked at the documents again, the financial records, the wire transfers, the web of corruption that extended far beyond one racist judge. What does she want? Immunity from prosecution, protection for her family, and a chance to testify about everything she's seen. That's a lot to ask for someone who's been participating in public corruption for 15 years. She has a lot to offer. Mercer closed her notebook. Attorney General, I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to look at the evidence. If what Maddox says is true, if this network is as extensive as she claims, then Vernon Whitmore is just the beginning. Victoria stood, walked to the window, looked out at Capitol Square, the seat of Virginia government, the symbol of justice she'd sworn to uphold. Set up a meeting, she said finally. Maddox, her lawyer, and representatives from my office and the DOJ. Tomorrow morning. Secure location. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. If her information doesn't check out, she's facing the same charges as everyone else. Mercer gathered her folder. It'll check out. I've been verifying it for 3 years. She left. Victoria remained at the window, watching the clouds move across the sky. The story was bigger than Whitmore. It was about to get bigger still. Wednesday morning. 6 a.m. The meeting took place at a secure facility outside Richmond, a nondescript office building used by the Attorney General's office for sensitive interviews. Victoria arrived first, followed by Monroe and 2 DOJ attorneys. Then Cassandra Mercer, who would observe but not participate. Finally, at 6:20 a.m., Lila Maddox walked through the door. She looked nothing like the hostile clerk Victoria remembered from the courthouse window. Her face was drawn, her eyes red-rimmed, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched a worn leather briefcase. Attorney General? Her voice was barely above a whisper. I don't know where to start. Start at the beginning, Victoria said. When did it begin? Maddox took a shaky breath. 15 years ago, I was a new clerk. Young. Made some mistakes. Got involved with someone I shouldn't have. A man who turned out to be connected to Wells Ogilvy. She looked down. There were photographs. Things I'm not proud of. Ogilvy said he'd make sure my husband found out unless I cooperated. Cooperated how? Small things at first. Moving files around, making sure certain cases got assigned to certain judges, adjusting docket orders so Ogilvy's clients got heard first. She swallowed. Then it got bigger. Cash payments for expedited processing, information about upcoming cases that Ogilvy could use to advise his clients, access to sealed records that should have been confidential. And Whitmore? He knew. Not everything. Ogilvy kept him insulated, but he knew that certain attorneys got favorable treatment. He knew that certain defendants got crushed while others got off easy. He pretended it was about efficiency, about managing his docket, but... She shook her head. He knew. Monroe leaned forward. Ms. Maddox, do you have documentation of these arrangements? Yes. Maddox opened her briefcase. I've been keeping records for 8 years, ever since I realized that this wasn't going to stop, that Ogilvy would never let me go, that I'd be trapped forever unless someone brought the whole thing down. She pulled out a thick manila envelope. Bank records showing payments from Ogilvy to shell companies controlled by courthouse employees. Emails between Ogilvy and Whitmore discussing case management strategies. Phone logs showing coordination between the clerk's office and Ogilvy's firm before major rulings. She set the envelope on the table. And the recording Cassandra mentioned, Whitmore calling Ogilvy after the arrest, discussing how to clean house before the investigation started. Victoria opened the envelope, began reviewing the contents. Pages of financial records, email printouts with highlighted passages, a USB drive that presumably contained the audio recording. "This is extensive," she said finally. "I've had 15 years to document it." Maddox's voice cracked. 15 years of watching them destroy people. Defendants who didn't deserve what happened to them. Employees who tried to speak up and got fired. A court reporter who filed complaint after complaint and got ignored. She looked at Victoria. "When I saw you in that courtroom, standing there, refusing to back down, getting arrested for telling the truth, I realized I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't keep pretending I didn't see what was happening. You could have come forward years ago." "I was afraid." Tears ran down her face. "Ogilvy made it clear what would happen if I talked. My marriage, my children, everything I'd built. He said he'd destroy it all." Victoria studied her for a long moment. "Ms. Maddox, if your information checks out, if the evidence you're providing leads to successful prosecutions, the DOJ may be willing to offer limited immunity. But you need to understand something." She leaned forward. "Immunity doesn't mean forgiveness. It doesn't mean what you did was okay. 15 years of corruption. Defendants whose lives were destroyed because you moved their files to the bottom of a stack. Justice delayed or denied because you were afraid." Maddox flinched. "I know." "Do you? Do you understand that for every document in that envelope, there's a person who suffered? A defendant who paid a fine they couldn't afford? A family that lost wages because someone waited hours for a case that should have taken minutes?" "I understand." Maddox's voice was barely audible. "I've lived with it every day for 15 years. Victoria sat back. "Good. Then let's get started." The interview lasted 6 hours. Maddox walked them through the entire network. Names, dates, amounts, the elaborate system of kickbacks and favors that had corrupted Jefferson County's justice system for over a decade. By noon, the DOJ attorneys had filled 3 legal pads with notes. The USB drive had been handed off to forensic analysts for authentication. At 2 p.m., Monroe pulled Victoria aside. "It checks out. The financial records match what we've already found. The emails are consistent with metadata from courthouse servers, and the recording—" She shook her head. "It's devastating. Whitmore explicitly discussing evidence destruction with Ogilvy. That's obstruction, easy." "What about Ogilvy himself?" "Bigger target than Whitmore. He's the architect of the whole scheme. If Maddox's testimony holds up, we're looking at RICO charges, public corruption, conspiracy, maybe wire fraud depending on how the money moved." Victoria felt something shift inside her, the cold satisfaction of a case coming together, of justice finally within reach. "What do you need from me?" "Keep doing what you're doing. The state investigation complements the federal one. If we coordinate properly, we can build parallel cases, federal charges for the corruption, state charges for the civil rights violations." "And Whitmore's removal from the bench?" "That's state judicial conduct, your jurisdiction. Based on what we've found, I'd say you have more than enough for formal removal proceedings." Victoria nodded. "I'll start the process today." Thursday afternoon, the Virginia Judicial Conduct Commission. Victoria stood before the 7-member panel, presenting the preliminary findings of her investigation. Behind her, a screen displayed financial records, email excerpts, and transcripts of the audio recording. "Commission members," she said, "the evidence demonstrates a clear pattern of judicial misconduct spanning at least a decade. Judge Vernon Whitmore knowingly participated in a scheme to provide favorable treatment to defendants whose attorneys paid for access. He systematically discriminated against defendants of color, defendants without legal representation, and defendants who attempted to exercise their constitutional rights." She clicked to the next slide. "On October 16th of this year, following my appearance in his courtroom, Judge Whitmore authorized the destruction of court records that would have documented these patterns. This recording, obtained through a cooperating witness, captures Judge Whitmore explicitly discussing evidence destruction with Wells Ogilvy." She pressed play. Whitmore's voice filled the room, tired, angry, desperate. "We need to clean house. Everything from the past 3 years. If they find the arrangement, we're all going down." Ogilvy's response: "What about the court reporter? Delane's been documenting everything." "Fire him. Find a reason. I don't care what it is." "And the woman? Holloway?" A pause. "She's in custody. By Monday she'll have a record. Assault on a peace officer. No one will believe anything she says." Victoria stopped the recording. "Commission members, I recommend immediate suspension of Judge Vernon Whitmore pending full disciplinary proceedings. The evidence of misconduct is overwhelming. The damage to public trust is incalculable, and the obligation of this commission is clear." She gathered her materials. "Justice delayed is justice denied. I urge you to act swiftly." Check. The commission deliberated for 2 hours. At 6:15 p.m., they announced their decision. The Virginia Judicial Conduct Commission finds sufficient evidence of serious misconduct to warrant immediate suspension of Judge Vernon Whitmore from all judicial duties. The suspension will remain in effect pending formal disciplinary proceedings, which will commence within 60 days. Victoria watched from the gallery as the announcement was made. She didn't smile, didn't celebrate. This was just the beginning. Whitmore would fight the charges. Ogilvy would hire expensive lawyers. The network would try to protect itself, to minimize damage, to sacrifice the lowest-level players while the architects escaped. That was how the system worked. But Victoria had spent 12 years as a federal prosecutor. She knew how to build a case, how to turn witnesses, how to follow the money until it led to the people who really mattered. Whitmore was suspended. Now it was time to bring down everyone else. Save this video. You need to see how this ends. 4 months later, February 2025. The Jefferson County investigation had consumed Victoria's first months as Attorney General. Depositions, document reviews, witness interviews. The slow, grinding work of building cases that would hold up in court. The results were starting to show. Wells Ogilvy had been indicted on federal charges in January: RICO conspiracy, public corruption, wire fraud. His trial was scheduled for June. He'd tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the DOJ had rejected his initial offers. They wanted names. They wanted the full network. Lila Maddox had testified before a federal grand jury. Her immunity deal had held up, barely. The recordings she'd provided were devastating, and her testimony had led to 3 additional indictments. A local businessman who'd paid for favorable rulings in contract disputes, a real estate developer who'd bribed officials to expedite zoning decisions, and a county administrator who'd helped coordinate the scheme. Gage Combs had been fired from the courthouse and was facing state charges for his conduct during Victoria's arrest. The security camera footage from the hallway, the footage he'd thought was deleted, had been recovered by forensic analysts. It showed everything: the unprovoked grab, the slam against the wall, the handcuffs applied with excessive force. Marcus Delane had been promoted to chief court reporter. His 8 months of documentation had formed the foundation of both the federal and state cases. Victoria had written him a personal letter of commendation, the same letter she'd referenced in her outline, the one he kept in his desk drawer. And Vernon Whitmore. Vernon Whitmore was a broken man. His suspension had been made permanent in December. The Judicial Conduct Commission had found him guilty of multiple violations: discriminatory treatment of defendants, falsification of court records, obstruction of justice. He'd been removed from the bench, stripped of his pension, and barred from ever holding judicial office in Virginia again. But the criminal case was still pending. Federal prosecutors were building charges under 18 U.S.C. Section 242, willful deprivation of constitutional rights under color of law. The evidence was strong: years of documented discrimination, the audio recording, testimony from Maddox and other witnesses. If convicted, Whitmore faced up to 10 years in federal prison. The trial was scheduled for September. February 14th. Victoria's office. She was reviewing documents when Pamela knocked on the door. The DOJ status report is in. Summary: investigation ongoing. 37 former defendants interviewed. 18 reported experiences consistent with documented patterns. Several requested documents still outstanding. Internal emails from 2021 through 2023 marked attorney-client privilege. Victoria frowned. The privilege claims are still holding up? For now. The courthouse is arguing that communications between Whitmore and his personal attorney are protected. DOJ is fighting it, but these things take time. The redacted emails. 3 years of communications that might reveal the full scope of the conspiracy, still locked away behind legal arguments. What about Ogilvy's cooperation? Limited. He's providing information about lower-level participants, but he's protecting someone. Every time the questioning gets close to certain topics, his lawyer shuts it down. What topics? Connections outside Jefferson County, relationships with state officials, the possibility that the network extended beyond one courthouse. Victoria set down the document she'd been reading. He's protecting someone higher up the chain. That's Monroe's assessment, yes. Victoria walked to the window, looked out at Capitol Square. The investigation had exposed corruption at the Jefferson County Courthouse. But what if that was just the visible part of a larger structure? What if the network extended into other counties, other courthouses, other branches of government? Set up a call with Monroe, she said. I want to discuss expanded investigation parameters. Yes, ma'am. Pamela left. Victoria remained at the window, watching the winter sun sink toward the horizon. Some battles took years. Some victories were partial, incomplete, the beginning of something rather than the end. She'd started this fight to expose one racist judge. She was beginning to understand that the fight was much larger than that. March 3rd. Press conference. Victoria stood at the podium in the Attorney General's building, announcing the creation of a new unit within her office. Today, I am proud to announce the establishment of the Judicial Accountability Unit. This unit will be responsible for investigating complaints of judicial misconduct, monitoring compliance with court reform measures, and ensuring that the failures we exposed in Jefferson County are never repeated. Questions from the press. Attorney General Holloway, how will this unit be funded? Initial funding comes from existing departmental resources. We've requested additional appropriations from the General Assembly for the coming fiscal year. Do you anticipate resistance from the judiciary? I anticipate that judges who conduct themselves ethically have nothing to fear, and judges who don't should be very concerned. What about Wells Ogilvy's trial? Any comment on the federal case? The federal case is being handled by the Department of Justice. I have full confidence in their prosecution team. Attorney General, one more question. There are rumors that the investigation has uncovered connections beyond Jefferson County. Can you comment? Victoria paused. The investigation is ongoing. We will follow the evidence wherever it leads. She gathered her materials and left the podium. The policy was announced. The unit was established. Whether it would be enforced, whether the resources would materialize, whether the political will would hold, remained to be seen. March 12th, Victoria's office. The envelope arrived without fanfare. Pamela brought it in with the morning mail. A standard business envelope, no return address, postmarked from the neighboring state where Wells Ogilvy had once planned to relocate before his indictment. Victoria opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a photograph. The image showed a courthouse hallway, Jefferson County, outside courtroom 4B. The timestamp in the corner read, October 16th, 2024, 2:51 p.m. The 10-minute gap. Victoria remembered. The security footage from that day had been missing a segment. From 2:47 p.m. to 2:57 p.m., the cameras had recorded nothing. Records showed the footage had been accessed 3 times before the gap was discovered. The access logs listed only admin, but someone had captured this moment, someone with a camera or a phone, someone who'd been in that hallway at exactly the right time. The photograph showed 2 figures near the judge's chamber's door. One was clearly Vernon Whitmore. His face was visible, his expression urgent. The other figure was turned away from the camera, a silhouette in an expensive suit. tall, broad shoulders, the posture of someone accustomed to authority, not Wells Ogilvy. Victoria knew Ogilvy's build, his mannerisms. This was someone else. Someone who'd been in that hallway during the 10-minute gap. Someone who'd met with Whitmore in the middle of the crisis. Someone whose identity had been protected by the deletion of security footage. No note accompanied the photograph. No explanation, just the image. Victoria placed it in her evidence file. The investigation would continue. 6 months later. September 2025. Vernon Whitmore stood trial in the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia. The charges: willful deprivation of constitutional rights under color of law, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to violate civil rights. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Victoria attended when she could, sitting in the gallery, watching the prosecution present the evidence she'd helped gather. The financial records, the audio recording, the testimony of Lila Maddox and Marcus Delane, and a dozen former defendants who'd been systematically mistreated in Whitmore's courtroom. The defense argued that Whitmore was a scapegoat, that he'd been following informal practices that existed throughout the Virginia court system, that the new Attorney General had targeted him for political reasons. The jury didn't buy it. On September 24, 2025, Vernon Whitmore was found guilty on all counts. Sentencing was scheduled for November. The maximum penalty was 10 years in federal prison. November 15th. Sentencing hearing. Victoria was there. So was Marcus Delane. So was Cassandra Mercer, covering the story for a national outlet now. The courtroom was packed. Judge Harrison Carmichael presided, a federal judge with a reputation for fairness and no connection to Jefferson County politics. "Mr. Whitmore," Carmichael said, "you have been found guilty of serious crimes, crimes that betrayed the public trust, crimes that caused real harm to real people, citizens who came to your courtroom seeking justice and received discrimination instead." Whitmore stood at the defense table. He looked older than he had a year ago, smaller. "Do you have anything to say before I impose sentence?" Whitmore's lawyer nudged him. "Your Honor." His voice was hoarse. "I served on that bench for 28 years. I believed I was doing my job. I believed I was maintaining order, managing my docket, ensuring that the courthouse ran efficiently." He paused. "I never thought of myself as corrupt. I never thought of myself as racist. I thought I was just doing what everyone else was doing." Carmichael's expression didn't change. "The evidence suggests otherwise, Mr. Whitmore. The evidence suggests a deliberate pattern of discrimination, a conscious choice to treat certain defendants worse than others, a willingness to participate in a corruption scheme that enriched your associates while harming the people you were sworn to serve." He shuffled his papers. "The government has requested the maximum sentence of 10 years. The defense has requested probation, citing your age and years of service." He looked up. "I am imposing a sentence of 6 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. You will surrender to the Bureau of Prisons within 30 days. Gasps from the gallery. Whitmore's shoulders slumped. "Additionally," Carmichael continued, "I am ordering restitution in the amount of $250,000 to be distributed among defendants who can demonstrate harm resulting from your discriminatory practices." He banged his gavel. "Court is adjourned." Outside the courthouse, Victoria stood on the steps with Cassandra Mercer. 6 years, Mercer said. "Not the maximum, but significant." "It's something." "You don't sound satisfied." Victoria watched the media scrum around Whitmore's lawyer, the cameras flashing, the reporters shouting questions. Whitmore is one person. The network extended far beyond him. Wells Ogilvy is still awaiting trial. The mysterious figure in the photograph has never been identified. The redacted emails from 2021 through 2023 remain sealed. She turned to Mercer. "The system that protected Whitmore for 28 years is still mostly intact. We cut off one head. How many more are there?" Mercer was quiet for a moment. What are you going to do? Keep investigating. Keep pushing. The Judicial Accountability Unit is operational. We've opened preliminary inquiries in 3 other counties based on complaint patterns similar to Jefferson County. Do you think you'll find more Whitmores? Victoria looked at the courthouse, the white columns, the scales of justice carved in stone above the entrance. I think, she said slowly, that every system built by humans contains the potential for corruption. The question isn't whether bad actors exist. The question is whether we have the will to expose them. She started walking toward her car. And right now, at least for this moment, we do. That evening, Victoria sat alone in her office. The sun had set. The building was quiet. On her desk, spread out like artifacts from another life, were the documents that had started everything. The traffic citation, the photographs of the speed limit sign, the handwritten note from Marcus Delane, and the photograph from the envelope, the silhouette in the expensive suit, the 10-minute gap, the mystery that remained unsolved. She picked up the photograph, studied it for the 100th time. Someone had sent this to her. Someone who wanted her to know that the investigation wasn't complete, that there were still secrets buried in Jefferson County, that the network extended further than she'd uncovered. A warning? A tip? A taunt? She didn't know. But she would find out. Victoria placed the photograph in her evidence file, alongside all the other documents she'd gathered over the past year. The file was thick now, hundreds of pages, hours of testimony, the accumulated weight of a fight that had started with a traffic ticket and ended with a federal conviction. But it wasn't really an ending. It was a beginning. She closed the file and looked out the window at the lights of Richmond. Somewhere in those lights, someone knew who the silhouette was. Someone knew what had happened during those 10 minutes. Someone was watching, waiting, wondering what Victoria Holloway would do next. She intended to find them. And when she did, she would have another question for them. The same question she'd asked Vernon Whitmore, standing alone in that empty courtroom 14 months ago. For how many years did you believe that no one was watching? The lights of the city glittered in the darkness. Victoria Holloway smiled. She was still watching. Victoria Holloway walked into that courtroom as a nobody. No title, no badge, no army of lawyers behind her, just a black woman with a traffic ticket and the audacity to say, not guilty. And that's exactly the point. Judge Whitmore didn't see a threat. He saw what he always saw. Another defendant to humiliate. Another person without power. Another voice that didn't matter. 28 years of that arrogance. 28 years of crushing people who couldn't fight back. Until he crushed the wrong one. But here's the lesson that matters most. Victoria didn't need to be the Attorney General to deserve justice. Every defendant who stood at that podium before her, every person who waited hours while others were called first, every citizen who was mocked for knowing their rights, they all deserved the same dignity. The system failed them. Not because the laws were wrong, but because the people enforcing those laws believed no one was watching. Someone is always watching. If you've ever been dismissed because of how you look, if you've ever been told to know your place, if you've ever felt the weight of a system designed to break you, know this: your voice matters. Your documentation matters. Your refusal to stay silent matters. Change doesn't happen overnight. It happens when ordinary people decide that enough is enough. So here's your call to action. Subscribe. Share this story. And the next time you see injustice, whether in a courtroom, a workplace, or a traffic stop, remember Victoria Holloway. Document everything, and never let them tell you that no one is listening, because someone always is.